Fellow human geographers, we are back at it again this evening. Tonight, we are going to examine some of the political processes that have influenced the contemporary political map. So we're going to have some vocabulary we're going to introduce, but more importantly tonight are the real-life examples and the history behind those examples, because the impacts of those historical processes are written on our world maps. So let's begin by reviewing some information from our last lecture. We mentioned that a nation state is a state whose territory is identical to that occupied by a single particular ethnic group or nation, and that many political geographers consider a nation state, like Japan, to be ideal due to its political, cultural composition. An ethnicity, like Japanese, has its own country, can make its own decisions, and has the recognition of the international community to do so. So why aren't there more nation states if that is considered, as it is by many experts, to be the ideal? Well, there are a few things that are necessary before a nation can become its own country and thus be considered a nation state. First and foremost, there must be the desire for self-determination, which is a concept that ethnicities have the right to govern themselves. Many nations desire this right to govern themselves because it means the will of their people is heard and that they have the recognition to decide for themselves. And remember that recognition is central to the formation of a state. But many nations want self-determination, want the right to govern themselves, but many nations do not have their own state. So where's the disconnect? What many nations lack is sovereignty, which is a principle that holds that final authority over social, economic, and political matters should rest with the legitimate rulers of independent states. In other words, sovereignty is the ability to have the final decision on what happens within a country's borders. And in order to have that final authority, a government must have complete control over that defined territory and have its population acknowledge and follow those laws and rules, and that no one can interfere with those decisions. So let's use a simple example, and then later tonight we'll examine a few more relevant examples. The U.S. subnational unit of Nevada is called a state, but it's not synonymous with country, like Canada is a state. Why? They both have permanent populations, defined territories, and established governments. And they both have sovereignty, but different degrees of sovereignty. Canada has final authority within its borders. The Canadian government has the final say on what happens within its defined territory. Does Nevada have the final authority within its borders? No. The United States government does. So what differentiates a subnational unit like Nevada from a state or a country like Canada is the level of authority they have. Nevada does not have complete authority. Canada does. So let's take a look at the history that influences contemporary processes of self-determination and sovereignty. And we'll begin with two concepts that are often used interchangeably, but that we need to be able to distinguish between. Imperialism is the push to create an empire by exercising force or influence to control other nations or peoples. As we can see here with the British Empire, it is the broad relationship whereby core areas dominate peripheral areas by controlling their economic, political, and cultural systems. The British had the largest empire in the world, followed by the French. And that could be through direct conquest, economic control, or cultural domination. But imperialism refers to the exercising of force, whether direct or indirect, on other nations or peoples. So colonialism is a type of imperialism. It's the result of imperialism. Colonialism is an attempt by one country to establish settlements and to impose its political, economic, and cultural principles in another territory. These settlements are known as colonies. So colonization is one way of building an empire. But there are other ways to exercise control without establishing colonies, as we will continue to explore this year. And when talking about colonialism, the focus tends to be on the centuries-long process of European countries competing amongst themselves to conquer and control other people and their territories around the world. The process of colonialism began in the 16th century and was done in two waves. The first wave began in the 1500s or 16th century, with Spain and Portugal establishing colonies in the Americas. After independence movements in the Americas during the late 1700s and 1800s, a second wave of colonialism began in the late 1800s, as countries like Britain, France, the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, and Italy competed to build empires by controlling lands in Africa and Asia. These European powers were seeking to accomplish a variety of different goals through colonialism. Take a look at that definition again. These countries wanted to impose their cultural, economic, and political principles, which can often be shortened to a nice mnemonic device. The reasons that countries sought out colonies was for God, gold, and glory. God alludes to the fact that European countries wanted to spread Christianity, a universalizing religion, to the rest of the world. In fact, the diffusion of language and religion from Europe to other countries is one of the lasting legacies of the colonial era. Gold references the economic control imposed on colonies. Colonial powers exploited the land, labor, and capital of colonies to enrich their home country. Colonizers organized the flows of raw materials from colonies. The expansive use of plantations, ports, mines, and railroads in colonies illustrate this principle. And the Industrial Revolution fueled the second wave of colonization as European powers needed greater sources of raw materials as well as additional markets to sell their manufactured goods to. And finally, glory refers to the fact that European countries sought to colonize huge expanses of land and establish sovereignty or authority, control, in an attempt to build powerful empires. This was accelerated at the Berlin Conference, which was held during 3 months spanning 1884 to 1885. At this conference, representatives from the leading European powers, as well as the United States and Russia, met. 14 countries in total sat down, but not a single African was present at the conference. At the start of this conference, only the coastal areas of Africa had been colonized. By the end, the interior was divided up amongst European powers. And since no Africans were included, boundaries were drawn that gave no consideration for existing ethnic, linguistic, cultural, or political boundaries that already existed. So one colony might include a patchwork of rival cultural groups, and one cultural group might be divided amongst multiple colonies from different European countries. And many of the European boundaries that were drawn at the Berlin Conference still exist today. But the first step toward achieved self-determination is the rise of an independence movement. And by the late 20th century, almost all European colonial territories had won independence, a process known as decolonization, meaning former colonies were now independent states with complete sovereignty. European states lost their colonies in the Western Hemisphere during the 1700s and 1800s. Following World War II, though, independence movements in many Asian and African colonies moved forward. India had been a British colony for over 200 years, until 1947. 32 other colonies gained their independence between 1960 and 1970. Portugal, though, attempted to hold on to its African colonies until 1975. And France sought to maintain a hold on Algeria because many French colonists had settled there. And white minority rule in South Africa resisted self-determination the longest under a system known as apartheid. In the end, though, many colonies desired self-determination, pushed for independence, and gained their sovereignty. As a result, there are now more than 4 times as many states today as there were in 1939. But there are still stateless nations who desire self-determination and have not been granted their sovereignty. Catalonia, an economically strong region of northeast Spain, which includes the city of Barcelona, has desired self-determination for decades. A Catalan nationalist movement has pushed for sovereignty, even holding multiple votes on independence that the national government in Madrid has declared invalid. The Kurds in Iraq maintain their own regional government, while Kurds in Syria may attempt to secede and attempt to gain a state of their own. Some national governments have attempted to de-escalate these independence movements by transferring some sovereignty to stateless nations within their borders in an attempt to grant them self-determination. This process is known as devolution, which is the transfer of certain powers from the state central government to separate political subdivisions within the state's territory. In multinational states, devolution often happens along national lines. Canada has granted greater authority to the Québécois in Quebec. Spain has done the same with the Catalan nation. But it hasn't assuaged the Catalan independence movement as it did for the Québécois. And when independence movements remain strong, the result could be the breakup of a state. The former Yugoslavia was a multinational state, and in 1991, independence movements pushed for sovereignty. A bloody civil war ensued, including acts of ethnic cleansing and genocide. Eventually, 7 states declared their independence. But the issue of sovereignty still hangs over the region of Kosovo, as the United Nations does not recognize it as a state, despite over 100 countries, including the United States, who do recognize its sovereignty. So there's a lot of history and a lot of real-life examples that we examine tonight. We will continue to examine them in greater detail when we return to class. Have a good evening, everyone.